The man who masters himself will never be enslaved by the world, not because the world stops trying, but because he has already defeated the only opponent that ever mattered. There is a version of you that has already quit. There is a version of you that gave up on the dream, settled for comfort, accepted mediocrity as a permanent address, and told itself that the life it wanted was never really meant for someone like you. That version exists. It is not hypothetical. It lives in every moment you hesitate. It breathes in every excuse you repeat. It grows stronger every time you choose ease over effort, distraction over discipline, comfort over courage. And here is the part that should disturb you. That version of you is not some distant possibility. It is the default. It is the version you become if you do nothing, if you change nothing, if you keep running on the same broken programming that has kept you spinning in circles, wondering why your life feels stuck, wondering why nothing changes, wondering why you keep waking up to the same emptiness disguised as routine. That version of you does not require effort. It requires only your silence, your passivity, your willingness to keep drifting. But there is another version too, one that stands in complete opposition to everything you have been. One that does not flinch in the face of discomfort. One that has made peace with pain, not because it enjoys suffering, but because it understands that suffering is the cost of becoming something greater. That version is not louder. It is not angrier. It is not driven by ego or revenge or the desire to prove anyone wrong. That version is simply unbreakable, and this audiobook is the blueprint to becoming it. Let us begin with the truth that most people will never accept. Discipline is not a trait. It is not genetic. It is not something some people are born with and others are not. Discipline is a decision. It is a decision that must be made not once, not on some inspired Monday morning or on the first day of a new year, but every single day, in every single moment where your mind tries to negotiate its way out of the work. You have been told that motivation is the engine, that if you just find enough inspiration, enough reason, enough emotional fuel, you will suddenly become the person who follows through. But that is a lie. Motivation is a spark. It flares, it dies, and the moment it fades, you are left with nothing but yourself and the question of whether you will move without it. That is where discipline begins. Not in the fire of excitement, not in the rush of a new goal, but in the silence after the fire has gone out, when no one is watching, when the world has stopped applauding, when every fiber of your being is begging you to stop, and you take the next step anyway. That is discipline. And it is the single most powerful force available to any human being who wants to reshape their life from the inside out. You must understand something about yourself that nobody has told you clearly enough. You are not weak because you struggle. You are not broken because you have failed. You are not behind because other people appear to be further ahead. What has happened to you up until this point is not evidence of your limitations. It is evidence that you have been operating without a system, without a framework, without a psychological infrastructure strong enough to support the weight of who you are trying to become. You have been trying to build a skyscraper on the foundation of a shed, and every time the structure collapses, you blame yourself instead of examining the foundation. This is where the shift begins, not with doing more, not with trying harder in the same broken way, but with understanding, at the deepest level, how your mind works, why it resists growth, and what it takes to override the patterns that have kept you small. Your mind is not your ally by default. This is one of the most important things you will ever learn. The brain you carry is an ancient machine, designed not for greatness but for survival. It does not care about your goals. It does not care about your potential. It cares about conserving energy, avoiding threat, and maintaining the familiar. That is its job, and it does that job with terrifying efficiency. Every time you try to push past your comfort zone, your mind will generate resistance. It will create fear. It will whisper doubt. It will whisper reasons to stop, to wait, to reconsider. It will dress laziness in the language of logic. It will convince you that tomorrow is a better time to start. It will remind you of past failures and frame them as prophecy rather than education. And if you do not understand this mechanism, you will obey it every single time. You will think you are making a rational decision when in reality you are being controlled by a survival instinct that has no interest in your evolution. The disciplined mind is not a mind without resistance. It is a mind that has learned to act in the presence of resistance. It does not wait for fear to leave. It does not wait for doubt to dissolve. It moves while afraid. It executes while uncertain. It builds while the inner voice screams stop. That is the difference between those who transform and those who remain trapped. It is not talent. It is not luck. It is the willingness to function in discomfort without needing the discomfort to end first. Now let me tell you about identity, because this is where most self-improvement efforts silently fail. You can set goals, you can create plans, you can write affirmations, you can visualize outcomes, but if the identity underneath all of that has not shifted, none of it will hold. You will always return to who you believe you are. Always. A person who believes they are lazy will find evidence of laziness everywhere. A person who believes they are undisciplined will sabotage every routine they build. A person who secretly believes they are not worthy of the life they want will unconsciously destroy every opportunity that brings them closer to it. This is not mysticism. This is psychology. Your self-concept acts as a thermostat. It determines the range of results you will allow yourself to experience. Set it too low, and no matter how hard you work, you will cool back down to the temperature you believe you deserve. This is why some people work relentlessly and never move forward. Their effort is real, their pain is real, but their identity has not changed, and so the results cannot change either. You do not need to do more. You need to become more. You need to fundamentally rewrite the story you tell yourself about who you are, not with hollow affirmations spoken into a mirror without conviction, but with action, with proof, with undeniable evidence that the person you were yesterday no longer exists, because the person you are today chose differently, moved differently, thought differently, responded differently to the same old triggers. This is the mechanism of identity shift. You do something small that contradicts the old version of you. You do it again, and each repetition adds a brick to a new structure. Each time you wake up early when you used to sleep in, you are casting a vote for a new identity. Each time you choose the difficult conversation over avoidance, you are casting a vote. Each time you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it with distraction, a screen, food, substances, meaningless noise, you are casting a vote. And over time, those votes accumulate. The new identity does not arrive in a single moment of transformation. It is built silently, brick by brick, choice by choice, in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. Most people abandon the process because they expect the shift to be dramatic. They expect to wake up one day and feel different. But that is not how it works. You become different long before you feel different. The feelings follow the behavior, not the other way around. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop waiting to feel like the person you want to become. Act as that person now, and the feeling will follow. Let us talk about silence, not the absence of noise, but the deliberate practice of restraint. In a world that rewards reaction, loudness, constant expression, and instant emotional output, silence is one of the most misunderstood and underused forms of power. When someone provokes you and you do not respond, that is not weakness. That is dominance over your own impulses. When something goes wrong and you do not spiral into panic or complaint, that is not indifference. That is emotional mastery. When you are in a room full of noise and chaos and your internal state remains calm, that is not detachment. That is sovereignty. The undisciplined mind leaks energy everywhere. It reacts to every comment. It absorbs every opinion. It responds to every provocation. It is constantly shaped by its environment because it has no internal anchor. The disciplined mind is the opposite. It is rooted. It is centered. It chooses what to engage with and what to release. It does not fight every battle because it understands that most battles are distractions dressed as urgency. Silence is not passive. It is one of the most active choices you can make. It requires you to override the instinct to defend, to explain, to justify, to react. And in that override, you reclaim something most people have lost: control over your own energy. Protect your energy the way you would protect your life, because in many ways, it is your life. Where your energy goes, your reality follows. Pour it into reactions, and your life becomes reactive. Pour it into creation, discipline, and growth, and your life becomes a masterpiece built with intention. There is another truth you need to sit with, and it is this: most of the people around you are not going to understand the path you are choosing. When you start to change, when you start to pull away from old habits, old patterns, old versions of socializing, old ways of spending your time, the people who knew the old you will become uncomfortable. Not because they want to hold you back, although some of them will, but because your change reflects their stagnation. Your discipline becomes a mirror, and most people do not want to look into a mirror that shows them what they are avoiding. You will lose people on this journey. You will lose friendships that were built on shared dysfunction. You will lose relationships that only existed because you were both standing still. You will lose access to the version of belonging that comes from fitting in, and that will hurt. It will feel isolating. It will feel like you are walking a path no one else can see. But that isolation is not punishment. It is refinement.
It is the natural consequence of outgrowing the container you were in. A seed does not stay in the soil because it is comfortable. It breaks through because it must. Your growth will break things. Let it. What falls away was never meant to stay.
Now let me speak directly to the part of you that is tired. Not physically tired, although you may be that too, but existentially tired. Tired of starting over. Tired of watching yourself repeat the same cycles. Tired of knowing what you should do and not doing it. Tired of the gap between your potential and your reality. I want you to know that this fatigue is not a sign that you should stop. It is a sign that the old way of operating is reaching its limit. You are not tired because you are failing. You are tired because you are still carrying the weight of a version of yourself that no longer fits. And that weight, the weight of old beliefs, old stories, old emotional patterns, is exhausting not because it is heavy in itself, but because carrying it requires you to constantly fight against your own growth. You are using energy to stay small. You are using effort to remain stuck. And the moment you release that, the moment you stop investing in the old identity, the energy returns. Not because circumstances change, but because you are no longer burning fuel to maintain a life that is beneath you. Let us talk now about emotional control, because this is the foundation upon which all discipline is built. You can have the best routine in the world. You can wake up at 5 in the morning, exercise, eat perfectly, work relentlessly. But if you are emotionally unregulated, if you are still at the mercy of your moods, your reactions, your impulses, your triggers, then your discipline is a house of cards and the first strong wind will flatten it. Emotional control is not about suppressing what you feel. It is not about becoming cold or numb or detached from the human experience. It is about creating space between stimulus and response. Something happens. Before you react, there is a gap. In that gap lives your freedom. Most people have no gap. The event happens, the emotion fires, the reaction follows, and the damage is done, all in the span of a breath. They say things they do not mean. They make decisions from anger, fear, jealousy, insecurity. They let a single moment of emotional flooding undo weeks, months, sometimes years of progress. The mentally strong individual is not someone who does not feel. They feel everything, sometimes more deeply than others, but they have trained themselves to observe the feeling before acting on it. They notice the anger rising without becoming the anger. They feel the pull of fear without surrendering to it. They sit with discomfort without reaching for the nearest escape. This is not a natural ability, it is a trained one. And like any skill, it is built through repetition, through exposure, through the willingness to stay present in moments that make you want to run. Here is a practice that will transform the way you engage with your own mind. Every time you feel a strong emotional impulse, pause. Do not act. Do not speak. Do not reach for your phone, for food, for distraction. Just pause. And in that pause, ask yourself one question. What is this feeling trying to protect me from? Because almost every emotional reaction is a form of protection. Anger protects you from feeling powerless. Anxiety protects you from perceived danger. Jealousy protects you from the fear of inadequacy. Avoidance protects you from the risk of failure. When you understand the root, the surface emotion loses its grip. You stop being controlled by it because you can see through it. This is not therapy language. This is warfare strategy for the mind. You are learning to see the mechanism, and once you see it, it can never operate unconsciously again. That is the beginning of true mental strength, not the absence of difficulty, but the complete, unflinching awareness of what is happening inside you and the trained ability to choose your response. Detachment is another pillar you must build. And I want to be clear about what detachment actually means, because it is one of the most misunderstood concepts in personal growth. Detachment does not mean you do not care. It does not mean you walk through life feeling nothing, wanting nothing, investing in nothing. Detachment means you are not owned by outcomes. You work with full commitment, full intensity, full presence, but you do not chain your emotional state to the result. You do the work because the work is who you are, not because the result defines you. This is a critical distinction. The person who is attached to outcomes lives in a constant state of anxiety. They are happy only when things go well. They are devastated when things go wrong. Their inner world is a roller coaster dictated entirely by external circumstances. The detached individual is different. They have an internal baseline that does not shift with the weather. They are not passive. They are deeply engaged, but their engagement comes from a place of internal authority, not external dependence. They do not need the world to cooperate in order to feel whole. And because of this, they are free. Free to take risks, free to fail without being destroyed, free to pursue greatness without being crushed by the distance between where they are and where they want to be. Detachment is not apathy. It is liberation. You also need to understand something about consistency that nobody tells you. Consistency is not about perfection. It is about return rate. You will miss days. You will fail. You will fall off the path. You will have mornings where you cannot get out of bed, where the weight of everything feels unbearable, where the old version of you screams louder than the new one. That is not the end of your discipline. The end comes only when you do not come back. Consistency is measured not by how many days in a row you execute flawlessly, but by how quickly you return after falling off. The person who misses a day and starts again the next morning is more disciplined than the person who has a perfect streak but quits entirely the moment it breaks. Do not worship the streak. Worship the return, because life will interrupt you. Circumstances will test you. And the question is never whether you will stumble. The question is always whether you will stand back up. That is the real measure of mental strength, not your highlight reel, not your best days, but your worst ones. What you do on the days when nothing inside you wants to move forward. That is the truest reflection of who you are becoming. Let me address something that many people carry silently and never speak about. The fear of actually becoming the person they say they want to be. This sounds contradictory, but it is one of the deepest psychological barriers to transformation. On the surface, you want success, discipline, strength, freedom, power, but underneath that desire, there is often a quiet terror, because becoming that person means leaving behind everything familiar. It means stepping into an identity that has no precedent in your life. It means standing in rooms where you feel like you do not belong. It means carrying a weight of responsibility that the old you never had to hold. It means being visible, being seen, being held to a higher standard. And for someone whose entire life has been spent hiding, playing small, blending in, that visibility feels dangerous. This is why people sabotage themselves at the edge of their own breakthroughs, not because they cannot handle success, but because they have never been taught how to hold it. They are afraid of their own power, not because the power itself is frightening, but because they have no model for what it looks like to wield it without being destroyed by it. If this resonates with you, if you have ever been on the verge of something great and pulled back, understand that what you were feeling was not inadequacy. It was unfamiliarity, and unfamiliarity is not a reason to retreat. It is a sign that you are entering territory you have never been in before. That is called growth. The standard you are to carry with you from this moment forward. Keep going. There is a phrase I want you to carry with you from this moment forward. The standard you accept is the standard you live. Read that again in your mind. The standard you accept is the standard you live. Every time you tolerate mediocrity in yourself, every time you tolerate mediocrity in yourself, in your work, in the people you surround yourself with, in the way you spend your hours, you are not just allowing something less than your best. You are programming yourself to expect less. You are training your mind to lower the bar. And once the bar is low, everything you build will be built to that height and no higher. The disciplined person does not merely set high standards. They refuse to negotiate with lower ones. They do not have cheat days from their identity. They do not take vacations from who they are becoming. They understand that every compromise, no matter how small, is a vote for the old self, a quiet permission slip that tells the brain it is acceptable to regress. This does not mean you live without grace. This does not mean you punish yourself for being human. It means you hold yourself with a seriousness that matches the life you are trying to create. You treat your word to yourself as sacred. When you say you will do something, you do it. Not because someone is watching. Not because there is a reward, but because the relationship you have with yourself is the most important relationship you will ever have. And every broken promise to yourself is a fracture in that foundation. You are going to face moments in this journey where it feels like nothing is working, where the effort seems pointless, where the gap between your input and your output feels impossible to bridge. These moments are not signs that you should stop. They are tests, not cosmic tests from some external force, but psychological tests from your own mind. Your brain is designed to seek patterns and predict outcomes. When it invests energy and does not see immediate results, it flags the behavior as inefficient and pushes you towards something with a faster return. This is why people jump from goal to goal, from method to method, from identity to identity. They are not flawed. They are simply obeying an unchecked survival mechanism that prioritizes short-term gain over long-term growth. The disciplined person overrides this mechanism with vision. They hold an image of where they are going that is so clear, so vivid, so deeply felt, that the temporary absence of results does not shake them. They are not delusional. They are patient. They understand that the most meaningful things in life are built slowly, in the dark, without applause, without recognition, without any external confirmation that they are on the right track. And they continue anyway. Because they are not building for the moment. They are building for the life. Confidence is another area that must be addressed. Because the kind of confidence that comes from discipline is fundamentally different from the confidence most people perform. Surface confidence is loud. It is performative. It relies on the reactions of others. It inflates when praised and deflates when criticized. It is fragile because it is built on sand, on appearance, on status, on the opinions of people who do not know you. But deep confidence, the kind that comes from showing up for yourself day after day, from honoring your word, from doing the work no one sees, from becoming the person you once only dreamed of being, that confidence is unshakable. It does not need to be announced. It does not need to be defended. It sits quietly inside you like a stone in a riverbed, unmoved by the current. You feel it when you walk into a room and you are no longer scanning for approval. You feel it when someone challenges you and your first instinct is not to react but to observe. You feel it when you lose something and your identity does not collapse, because your identity is no longer tied to what you have. It is tied to who you are. And who you are is not a product of circumstance. It is a product of discipline, of choice, of the thousands of invisible decisions you made when no one was looking. There is a concept I want you to internalize, and it is this: you must become the person who does not need the thing in order to have the thing. This sounds paradoxical, but it is the deepest truth of personal power. When you are desperate for success, you repel it, because desperation distorts your judgment, your energy, your presence. When you are desperate for love, you attract dysfunction, because you're operating from a void rather than from wholeness. When you are desperate for validation, you become a puppet, because every decision you make is filtered through the eyes of others instead of rooted in your own clarity. But when you have built yourself into someone who is whole without the external thing, who is stable without the outcome, who is grounded without the approval, the thing comes, not because you manifested it with some mystical force, but because you are no longer in your own way. You are no longer sabotaging the process with neediness, anxiety, and the frantic energy of someone who is trying to fill a hole that can only be filled from within. Discipline fills that hole. Self-respect fills that hole. Emotional control fills that hole. The work you do on yourself, in the quiet hours, in the unseen moments, in the private battles you fight and win, that fills the hole. And once it is full, you move through the world differently. You attract differently. You decide differently. You live differently, not because the world changed, but because you did. I want to leave you with something that will stay with you long after this audiobook ends. The person you are becoming does not exist in the future. They exist right now, in this moment, in the next choice you make. You do not become disciplined tomorrow. You become disciplined now, in the way you respond to the urge to stop listening and go back to distraction. You do not become mentally strong next year. You become mentally strong now, in the way you face the thought that tells you this will not work for you. You do not become unbreakable someday. You become unbreakable now, in the way you choose to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Every moment is an opportunity to cast a vote for the person you want to be. Not a grand gesture, not a dramatic transformation. Just a single, quiet, deliberate choice, and then another one, and then another one, until those choices become patterns, and those patterns become your character, and your character becomes your life. That is how it works. Not through force, not through willpower alone, not through some explosive moment of change, but through the slow, relentless accumulation of disciplined decisions made by someone who has decided, with absolute finality, that the old way of living is no longer acceptable. You are not here by accident. Something inside you brought you to this moment because it knows, even if your conscious mind doubts it, that you are capable of more. That knowing is not arrogance. It is recognition. It is the part of you that has always seen the gap between where you are and where you belong, and refused to make peace with it. Honor that part of you. Feed it with discipline. Strengthen it with consistency. Protect it with silence. And build from it a life that does not just look good on the outside, but feels unshakable on the inside. That is the goal. Not perfection. Not some impossible standard of flawlessness, but solidity. Groundedness, the deep, immovable knowledge that no matter what happens around you, you are not going to break, not because you are hard, but because you are built. Emotional control fills that hole. The work you do on yourself, in the quiet hours, in the unseen moments, in the private battles you fight and win, that fills the hole. And once it is full, you move through the world differently. You attract differently. You decide differently. You live differently. Not because the world changed, but because you did. I want to leave you with something that will stay with you long after this audiobook ends. The person you are becoming does not exist in the future. They exist right now, in this moment, in the next choice you make. You do not become disciplined tomorrow. You become disciplined now, in the way you respond to the urge to stop listening and go back to distraction. You do not become mentally strong next year. You become mentally strong now in the way you face the thought that tells you this will not work for you. You do not become unbreakable someday. You become unbreakable now in the way you choose to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Every moment is an opportunity to cast a vote for the person you want to be. Not a grand gesture, not a dramatic transformation, just a single, quiet, deliberate choice. And then another one, and then another one, until those choices become patterns, and those patterns become your character, and your character becomes your life. That is how it works. Not through force, not through willpower alone, not through some explosive moment of change, but through the slow, relentless accumulation of disciplined decisions made by someone who has decided, with absolute finality, that the old way of living is no longer acceptable. You are not here by accident. Something inside you brought you to this moment because it knows, even if your conscious mind doubts it, that you are capable of more. That knowing is not arrogance, it is recognition. It is the part of you that has always seen the gap between where you are and where you belong, and refused to make peace with it. Honor that part of you. Feed it with discipline. Strengthen it with consistency. Protect it with silence, and build from it a life that does not just look good on the outside, but feels unshakable on the inside. That is the goal. Not perfection, not some impossible standard of flawlessness, but solidity, groundedness, the deep, immovable knowledge that no matter what happens around you, you are not going to break. Not because you are hard, but because you are built. This is your life, not a rehearsal, not a draft, not a test run. This is it. The hours you are living right now, the minutes passing as you hear these words, they are the substance of your existence. And the question that matters more than any other is this: are you spending them in a way that the strongest version of you would respect? If the answer is no, then you know what to do. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are right, not when you feel ready. Now, because readiness is a lie your comfort zone tells you to keep you where you are. You will never feel ready. You will never feel certain. You will never have the perfect plan, the perfect moment, the perfect emotional state. You will only ever have now, and now is more than enough for the person who has decided that discipline is no longer optional. That mental strength is no longer something they admire in others, but something they demand of themselves. That the life they want is not somewhere out there waiting to be found, but something in here, inside them, waiting to be built. Build it, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice, in silence, in solitude, in the fierce, unwavering refusal to remain anything less than what you know you are capable of becoming. That is the path. It is not glamorous. It is not easy. It will not always feel rewarding in the moment, but it is the only path that leads somewhere real. And when you arrive, when you stand in the life you constructed with your own discipline, your own hands, your own unbreakable will, you will not need anyone to tell you it was worth it. You will know. Because you will feel it in your bones, in the steadiness of your breath, in the calm behind your eyes, in the quiet, absolute confidence of someone who is no longer trying to become something. You already are.